My name is Alex Monroe. I'm 41 years old, and 2 months ago I watched the two people I trusted most, my wife and my best friend, plan to destroy me. But before I tell you how I caught them, I need you to understand who I was before that night, because betrayal only hurts when you've given someone everything. Back in 2010, I was 26, just out of the military, 5 years in cyber intelligence. I'd spent my days tracing data leaks, tracking hackers who thought they were smarter than the system. When I got home, I didn't want to see another line of code for the rest of my life. But old habits don't die easy. That's how Monroe Digital Forensics was born. One man, one laptop, one tiny rented office in downtown Chicago. I helped small companies recover from ransomware, data theft, corporate espionage. The work was technical, exhausting, but it mattered. Then came Derek Lawson. He walked into my office one rainy Thursday afternoon. Confident smile, perfect haircut, tailored jacket that probably cost more than my rent. Said he'd read my article in a cybersecurity journal and wanted to invest. Not just money, he said, vision. He had contacts, charisma, and a degree from Northwestern that opened doors I didn't even know existed. I was good at systems. Derek was good at people. And in the beginning, that balance worked. Within 3 years, Monroe Digital Forensics grew from a one-man operation to a national firm with 12 employees and contracts with some of the biggest law firms in Chicago. We helped recover stolen corporate data, track insider leaks, and testify in federal cases. By 2018, we were pulling in $3.4 million annually. I handled the tech. Derek handled the image. And then there was Julia. Met her at a conference in Boston. She was a project manager for a software company, smart, elegant, with the kind of calm energy that made chaos feel like order. When she laughed, it wasn't loud, but it was real. She understood long hours, late nights, stress. When I talked about algorithms or encryption, she listened like it mattered. After 3 months of long-distance flights and midnight calls, she moved to Chicago. A year later, we were married. Derek was my best man. He toasted at our wedding, said I was the most loyal man he'd ever met. I believed him. For the first few years, life was good. We bought a brownstone on the north side, traveled when we could, kept growing the company. Julia managed our finances, Derek managed our clients, and I managed everything else. But over time, things started to shift. Julia stopped asking about my cases. She'd look at her phone when I spoke or say she was tired after work. And Derek, well, he was always around. He'd drop by the house to discuss business, staying for dinner. Brought wine, flowers, jokes that made Julia laugh in ways she hadn't in years. At first, I was grateful. Thought maybe he was helping keep the peace when I was too busy. But the more time they spent together, the less I saw my wife. The more she smiled at him, the less she looked at me. Then came the first red flag. A client called, furious about a data leak. I checked our systems. Everything was secure, except for one access log, Derek's. He'd downloaded a full client database at 2:17 a.m. on a Sunday, said he needed it for a presentation. At the time, I believed him. Because when you trust someone, your mind looks for reasons, not for evidence. I didn't know it yet, but that single download was the start of everything that would follow. The beginning of the plan that would take my company, my marriage, and almost my sanity. By 2020, everything looked perfect from the outside. We'd just signed a 5-year contract with a national insurance company worth $2.8 million. Our office had glass walls, mahogany desks, and an espresso machine Derek insisted we needed for clients. We were the kind of success story magazines loved, two veterans of different worlds, building a digital fortress for modern corporations. But behind the smiles, something was off. Julia started working later, saying her company was expanding into a new project. Her phone was always face down, and when I walked into a room, conversation stopped. Derek began calling her Jules, like they'd been friends for years. Once I walked into the conference room to find them laughing over lunch. Nothing inappropriate, just comfortable, too comfortable. You don't notice betrayal when it grows slowly. It's like a leak under the floorboards, silent, invisible, but deadly. Then came the missing funds. Every Friday I reviewed our corporate expenses, travel reimbursements, client costs, software renewals. But one line item caught my eye. $47,500, Strategic Consulting DL Partners LLC. The DL stood for Derek Lawson, and the account it was paid from wasn't our main operating fund. It was a side account Julia handled, the same one she used to pay taxes and utilities. I confronted her that night. She didn't flinch, just smiled and said, "It's an accounting oversight, Alex. I already told Derek to fix it." Her calmness bothered me more than the lie, because when someone lies to you and doesn't even blink, they've practiced. That weekend I decided to dig. Not emotionally, professionally. I'd built my career recovering data no one wanted found. Deleted emails, encrypted drives, burner phones. Julia forgot one thing about me. I see patterns for a living. Within 2 days, I found everything I needed. Hidden financial transfers from our joint account. Small at first, $800, $200, $2,900. Then larger, $15,000 for marketing, $21,000 consultant fees, all leading to one destination, a private investment account under Derek's name. It wasn't just money. It was betrayal written in numbers. I traced call logs next. Over 300 calls between them in a single month. Most lasted less than 2 minutes. Quick, precise, coordinated. Timing didn't match her late-night work. It matched his. When I compared their phone GPS data, it told a story words never could. They were in the same places, at the same time, over and over again. A restaurant near the river, a hotel in River North. Once, even at our lake house, the one I bought as a surprise for Julia's birthday 3 years earlier. I remember sitting in my office at midnight, staring at the data on my screen. Every digital footprint, text, call, GPS ping, like pieces of glass cutting through my chest. But I didn't lose control. 12 years in digital forensics teaches you one thing. Evidence is power. And I wasn't ready to strike yet. Instead, I decided to let them believe they were winning. The next morning I greeted Derek like nothing happened, congratulated him on the new client, joked about working too hard, even bought him coffee. Because when you're hunting someone, you don't chase them. You let them think the forest is safe. By February 2021, they'd grown bolder. Julia began mentioning divorce, casually, hypothetically. What if we took a break? Maybe we've grown apart. I listened, nodded, said nothing. Meanwhile, Derek started meeting with our accountant without me. Just financial planning, he said. He'd even signed documents with my digital signature. They weren't just planning to take my company, they were preparing to erase me from it. So I did what I was trained to do. I built a counter-operation, silent, clean, undetectable. Every server, every device, every account connected to our business was mirrored, encrypted, duplicated, stored off-site under a different name. Every conversation between them was recorded, every email archived, every keystroke logged. For 2 months, I watched them dismantle the life I'd built, unaware that every step they took was being documented by the very systems I'd created to protect our clients. And the best part? They thought they were invisible. April 2021, that's when they finally made their move. I'd just returned from a week-long conference in Washington, Cybersecurity Summit. When I came home, Julia wasn't there. Her closet half empty, wedding photo missing from the nightstand. On the kitchen counter, a single envelope. Alex, you've become someone I don't recognize. I need space. Please don't contact me. My attorney will handle everything. Her attorney was Mark Elliott, a divorce specialist known for 2 things, winning and ruining. I'd seen his face before. On the firm's client list we'd once investigated for data breaches, and I knew exactly how he worked. Psychological warfare wrapped in legal paperwork. Within 48 hours, I received a formal petition, claims of emotional neglect, work obsession, and paranoid surveillance tendencies. Every word designed to paint me as a controlling, unstable man unfit for partnership or fatherhood. Derek was listed as a character witness, The same man who'd toasted at my wedding now called me a liability. The same week, our company accountant discovered unauthorized transfers, $187,000 in total, moved quietly from operational reserves to a temporary vendor account. Vendor name, DL Strategic Investments. That was Derek's shell company. When confronted, Derek acted offended, said it was an accounting mistake. Then he smiled, leaned across my desk and said, "Maybe you should take some time off, Alex. Let me handle things for a while." That's when I knew. They weren't improvising. This had been planned for months, maybe longer, but what Derek didn't know was that I'd been planning too. Remember those mirrored servers? Every file, every message, every document. I had copies. The fake invoices, falsified financial records, internal memos, all of it. And through a private investigator I trusted, I learned Derek had registered a new corporation 3 weeks earlier, Lawson Cyber Defense Group, Inc. His plan was to bankrupt my company, take my clients, and rebrand under his own name. Julia's role was simple: destroy my credibility and personal life, while he stripped the business, divide and conquer. Classic strategy. Except they were up against someone who'd written the book on how to expose deception. One night, I logged into our system's remote server and watched Derek's office camera feed in real time. He didn't know I'd hidden a micro camera inside the base of the conference speaker, disguised as a power light. He was there with Julia. Documents spread across the desk. 2 glasses of wine. He slid a folder toward her. "You'll get the house and the accounts," he said. "I'll get the business. By the time he figures it out, he'll have nothing left to fight with." Julia hesitated, then nodded, and that's when I heard her say it. "He's brilliant, Derek. He'll find out." "Then," Derek replied, "we'll make him look insane before he can." That was the moment the anger stopped, because anger clouds judgment, and I needed my judgment razor sharp. So I did what I always do before an operation. I prepared. Step 1. Documentation. I compiled a full digital evidence record, 112 files, encrypted, time-stamped, and stored on cloud servers in 3 jurisdictions. Step 2. Leverage. Using access logs and financial metadata, I traced every fraudulent transaction Derek initiated. I even found a series of offshore transfers to a Cayman account under the name Monroe Holdings. He'd used my initials to mask his theft, a signature of arrogance I'd seen in every criminal I'd ever profiled. Step 3. Timing. You don't strike when they're suspicious. You strike when they think they've won. By June, Julia filed for divorce. Derek pushed a buyout agreement across my desk, offering to purchase my shares for $300,000. It was laughable. The company was worth 10 times that. I smiled, shook his hand, and said, "Send me the papers. I'll think about it." He thought that was surrender, but it was reconnaissance. Every time Derek sent me an email, it was routed through a mirrored proxy. Every keystroke, every edit, every deleted line recorded. He'd send clean versions to me and real versions to Julia and their lawyer, the ones where they discussed how to bury me. When you build systems meant to catch criminals, you learn how they think. They hide truth in plain sight. But I'd built my entire life learning how to see it. So I waited. I waited until the day before our divorce hearing, the day they planned to file their final company takeover. I wanted them both in one place at one time, because that's when I'd pull the trigger, not of a gun, but of the truth. They wanted a clean break, a tidy theft buried in divorce papers and polite legal language. They expected me to be broken, distracted, discredited. They expected me to run out of time and money. They were wrong. When you spend 12 years in Army intelligence and another decade building a company that thrives on anticipating threats, you learn something essential. The best defense is preparation, and the best offense looks a lot like meticulous patience. I had already completed the 3 steps: documentation, leverage, timing. What followed was logistics, the painful, unromantic work of turning evidence into action. First, I secured custody, but not in court with noise and theatrics. I secured it with ironclad paperwork, notarized affidavits, independent witness statements, daycare reports, school attendance logs, every email where Rebecca had praised Ethan in front of the kids. I lined everything up so that when the judge read my file, the narrative was impossible to flatten into workaholic father nonsense. Second, I neutralized the financial attack. When Ethan moved funds offshore, he assumed secrecy. He assumed speed would protect him. He miscalculated three things: the traceability of wire transfers, the cooperation of international banks when a fraud suit is well documented, and my old contacts at the Financial Crimes Unit. Within 24 hours of feeding the FBI the account numbers and transfer metadata, prosecutors had emergency freeze orders. Within 48 hours, Interpol was on his flight manifest. Ethan didn't get to Monaco. He got a cell in a French holding facility and a very short window to make a deal. He chose the deal that included returning assets and testifying. Smart move for someone who misjudged his opponent. Then came the more delicate surgery, disassembling the custody narrative they'd prepared. Rebecca and her attorney had crafted a portrait of a man so consumed by surveillance, I would be judged unfit. Ironically, the files they assembled to paint that portrait contained the same breadcrumbs that proved intent. There were receipts for hotel rooms, timestamps for meetings, messages where Ethan instructed Rebecca on legal phrasing, everything laid out in their own handwriting. When you collect the truth, you don't need moralizing. Evidence speaks cleaner than anger. At the hearing, I walked in without theatrics. No shouted accusations, no torn shirts. I placed a slim folder on the judge's bench and let the law do its work. High-resolution photos from hotel suites, bank records with wire trails, text threads showing the plan to marry litigation with theft. The sealed 2011 court documents on the Walsh family, cataloged and submitted to the proper authorities with a request for review. The room went quiet the way a theater does when the final act reveals the twist. Opposing counsel tried the usual tactics: delay, reframe, attack the messenger. They were professional at it. But you can't litigate forensic banking, server audit trails, and eyewitness logs into anonymity. The judge asked questions. The prosecutor asked for time to investigate the new evidence regarding the Rodriguez case. The custody motion failed before it even became a headline. Judge Walsh called her office to say she would recuse, then resigned. That soundbite rippled through the social pages before dinner. Senator Walsh's office released a statement about personal hardship and stepping back from public life, but the underlying motion had already begun. Once the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office received the material I provided, they moved with the kind of purpose you only see when systemic corruption is on the line. And then there was the cleanup at home. People imagine revenge as theatrical, grand gestures, public shaming. What matters in the end is restoration. For me, restoration meant two things: the safety and normalcy of my children, and a business that could survive outside the crosshairs of greed. I changed the locks. I replaced the cameras with open, mutually agreed monitoring for the kids' safety, not covert devices hidden to catch infidelity, but systems we all knew about installed to protect the children. I stopped sleeping in the office. I started reading stories again. Connor wanted truck noises every night. Madison invented a whispering owl that only I could mimic. Those whispers did more for me than any legal victory. Professionally, I spent 3 months rebuilding client confidence. I was transparent where possible. I sent letters to clients explaining the facts in neutral terms, provided them audit logs to prove no compromise of their data had occurred, and offered independent security assessments free of charge. Some clients left, others stayed and referred new business. The turnover was painful but survivable. That pain felt honest. The alternative, staying in a lie career, would have crushed me. Rebecca's fall wasn't dramatic in the tabloid sense. There were no public spankings on the courthouse steps. There were slow, cumulative consequences. The real estate deals she'd been nursing collapsed when investors balked at the risk of association. The flashy bracelet, the one Ethan gifted with stolen funds, was seized, listed as evidence. Her social circle closed politely at first, then colder. Money evaporated faster than anyone who hadn't been inside that life could understand. People asked me if I felt triumphant. The answer is complicated. There was relief, a deep, visceral relief when the final bank freeze went through and the custody order was signed. There was satisfaction when law enforcement reopened the Rodriguez case and Timothy Walsh was finally indicted. That felt like justice for a family who had waited a dozen years. But it wasn't joy. Retribution emptied closets, and the process taught me that justice and revenge are not the same. Revenge feels good for a moment and then it eats you. Justice reshapes the playing field so other families don't slide into the same trap. In exposing the truth about the Walsh cover-up, I didn't just save my own children, I forced a system to reckon with itself. That felt necessary. There were costs. I had to accept that the marriage was broken beyond repair. I watched the woman I'd loved make choices that hurt our family and had to let go. There's grief in that. Not theatrical grief, but the kind you carry like a scar. It teaches you where to be harder and where to be softer. It taught me patience for the people who stumble and a zero tolerance for those who plot deliberate harm. 2 years later at a baseball game, I sat in the stands and watched Connor belt a line drive toward left field. Madison wore a glittery crown she'd crafted at school and waved at me with icing on her face. In that ordinary, messy moment, the stakes shrank to a single perfect clarity. Presence matters more than power. It always did. Professionally, Reynolds Security Solutions grew stronger, not because I had someone to prove wrong, but because our models were validated by the most brutal of tests. Clients valued resilience. We offered not just technology but processes that assumed deception and neutralized it. People sometimes ask for a neat moral. What should someone do if they suspect betrayal? Practicality beats philosophy. Document. Seek counsel. Don't react without data. And above all, prioritize the people who can't defend themselves: children, employees, communities. If I have one last thing to say, it's this. Trust your instincts, but arm them with evidence. The world rewards those who plan, who prepare, and who understand that power without integrity is just an invitation for collapse. They thought they could outplay me. They forgot that the truth has its own momentum. When you line truth up with patience and precision, it becomes unstoppable. I didn't win because I wanted revenge. I won because I refused to let a lie become my children's legacy. Sometimes good guys win. Sometimes patience and preparation beat arrogance and greed. Sometimes truth really is enough. If you enjoyed this story, hit like and leave a comment. If you haven't subscribed, do it now and hit the notification bell for alerts about new stories like this. Thanks for watching. See you next video.